We are in the book of Joshua in chapter 22. And I started talking about Joshua chapter 22 last time because it almost thrust this new fledgling nation, not fledgling in terms of being youngsters, but they were new in the land of Canaan. They're 7 years in the land of Canaan now. They've gone in behind Joshua and they've conquered the strongest kings in Canaan and the strongest cities. And now 7 years have passed. All the 12 tribes, the 9.5 tribes that crossed the river with Joshua have all been given their allotment, the land that God intended for them to have with very defined borders. And in Joshua chapter 22, we start to focus a little bit on proper worship of Yahweh now that Israel is finally, after 500 years, the promise to Abraham that God would give Abraham and his descendants this land is a 500-year-old promise. And finally, Abraham's people, Israel, are in the land. How are they to worship properly? Are they to go to the gods of the Canaanites, Baal, Asherah, Ashtoreth, Dagon, Molech? Are they to worship the gods of the land in which they go, or are they supposed to erect the tabernacle that Moses built and worship God through the tabernacle, through the Levitical priesthood? That's the right answer. So the question is that I want to start with this morning, because this tabernacle and this altar right here, the brazen altar, is what Joshua chapter 22 is all about. That altar where the sacrifices, the sin, the guilt sacrifices, the sin offerings, all the offerings that Israel would bring Yahweh, bring the priesthood, the Levites, and then the Levites would kill those animals and bring that offering to God, all happened right there on that altar. And that's what the catch is in Joshua chapter 22, that altar. Because in all of Israel, the question is, where were the Jews supposed to bring their sacrificial offerings, their guilt offerings, their sin offerings, the offerings that were to cover their sins until the Lamb of God, Jesus, would come thousands of years later? Where were they supposed to bring their offerings to offer them to Yahweh? There was only one place. And what was the place? That tabernacle. That brazen, that altar made out of bronze. Those priests from the family of Levi. All of Israel was supposed to bring their sacrifices to that altar, and no other altar anywhere in the world. Wherever God chose to set up that tabernacle, it's in Shiloh right now, Shiloh, Shiloh in the book of Joshua. That's where they set it up. That's where it is. That's where Israel was to go to worship. And look what happens here. The events of Joshua chapter 22 almost thrust Israel into a civil war. Only 7 years have gone by, they've been in the land. And Israel almost destroys itself by going to war, which would have weakened Israel probably enough for the Canaanites to band together and kick them out of the land of Canaan. Joshua 22 says this in verse 1. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And he said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have listened to my voice in all that I commanded you." So remember, Moses agreed. Here's what's going on here. In case you haven't followed along with Joshua, in case you haven't been here, I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. Moses brought Israel a land around to the east side of the Jordan River in what is today the nation of Jordan. I'm sorry I don't have a map of it, but that's what happened. Moses, through the guidance of God, the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, God led Moses and the 2 million Jews around through the land of Jordan up to a place called the Plains of Moab, and that's where they stopped, on the east side of the Jordan River. Well, 2 of the tribes, Gad and Reuben, and half of one of the tribes, Manasseh, decided, because they were shepherds and keepers of flocks, that land of Bashan and that land of Gilead on the east side of the Jordan River, this would be real good land for us. We could make good money here. We could make good money here because this is good land for shepherding and flocking, being shepherds. And so Moses agreed to give this 2.5 tribes their inherited land on the wrong side, the east side of the Jordan River, not in the land of Canaan. Not in the land of Canaan. Not in the promised land. And the agreement that Moses made with these men is that if you want this land, I'll grant it to you. You can settle here. But you must go across the Jordan River with us and fight the battles to destroy Canaan strong enough for your brothers, all the other 9.5 tribes, to be able to settle in the land of Canaan. If you will agree to go into battle with them, and only when the battles are finished, when you've been released from duty, when you've been honorably discharged from me, Joshua, only then will you cross the river and go back to your families. Or it was Moses at the time. If you agree to that, then I'll give you this land on the wrong side of the river. And that's what Joshua is speaking of. He says, you have kept all that Moses commanded you. And that was the command. Cross the river and fight with your brothers. And they did it. Verse 3 says, you've not forsaken your brothers these many days to this day. 7 years is the period of time they've been away from their wives and their children. They left them on the east side of the Jordan. 7-year tour of duty. That's a long one. You've not forsaken your brothers, but you've kept the charge of the commandment of Yahweh your God. And now the Lord your God has given rest. The major battles are finished. And Joshua is discharging this 2.5 tribes of men to go back home, cross the river and go home. The Lord has given rest to your brothers as He spoke to them, as He promised them. Therefore, turn now and go to your tents, which were on the east side of the river, to the land of your possession, which is on the east side of the river. This is important because this event has to do with the Jordan River, and know that their possession was on the east side of the river. Turn now and go to your tents to the land of your possession, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. Here it is again, beyond the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, not in the land of Canaan. And here's the charge that Joshua gives them. I'm letting you go home. I'm dishonorably discharging you from your service. You've done a fantastic job. You've kept every promise you made to your brothers, the other tribes of Israel. You are to be honored and distinguished. I'm sending you home, but I have one other thing to tell you. Be very careful to observe the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. Don't leave here thinking that you can cross the river and live any old way you want to. You're Jews. We're the chosen people of God. We're the nation of God, and we are to be His people. He is to be our God, and we are to be His distinct people in all of the earth. So when you go back across the river to your inheritance, which Moses gave you, observe the Mosaic Law. Keep all of it, every bit of it. What was part of the Mosaic Law? When you have a sin offering or a guilt offering or a thanksgiving offering, where were you to take that offering? This is so important to this story. Where is the one place in Israel where the priest would receive that animal and offer it to God? Where was the one place? Right there. And this tabernacle is in the middle of the land of Canaan in Shiloh. Shiloh for you Texans. Shiloh for you Hebrew people. Be very careful. A command, not a suggestion, a cal imperative in the Hebrew, a command. Be very careful. Your life depends on it. Be very careful to observe the commandment, the law, which Moses commanded you. And then he breaks it down in this way. to observe the law of Moses, this is what what Joshua offers: to love the Lord your God. Observe the commandment, the law which Moses the Lord commanded you. How do we do that? By loving the Lord your God. So love Yahweh only, not the other so-called gods that you're going to be tempted to worship over there in Gilead and Bashan. One God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Moses, the God of the 10 plagues of Egypt, the God of the Red Sea, the God of manna, the God who brought water out of the rock, the God who allowed your feet for 40 years, your shoes to not wear off, and your clothing to not be torn to tattered. That God, that providing God, that redeeming God. Worship that God because He's the only God. So that's what He tells them. Love the Lord your God. He says to walk in all His ways. To walk, to obey Him as a lifestyle day by day. Walk in the truths that God has laid forth for a Jew to walk by. Now make no understanding, we are not Israel. We're studying the Old Testament to see, to more than anything, to find the character of God in this book. Who is this God we still worship? And what did He lay down for Israel? We are not. These commands that Joshua is telling Israel are not for the church. The church has a whole string of commands, over 1,000 of them. We do not walk by the Mosaic Law, the Mosaic commands. You'll notice that nobody brought a lamb or a pair of turtle doves here today. I don't have a knife to slaughter the animal. We don't have an altar to burn it on. We don't have an altar of incense. We don't have the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant here. We're not Israel. We're the church. So this is Jewish. But it's important nonetheless. Walk in all His ways, He says, and keep His commandments. This is the word shamar. Guard them as a treasured possession and maintain them. Keep doing them. Guard His commandments and hold fast to Him. This is the Hebrew word dabak. I love this word, D-A-B-A-Q, because it's what God told Adam and Eve in the garden. About a husband clinging to his wife, a wife clinging to her husband. That's the word you have here for how Israel and us as Christians are to hold on to our God like He's the most treasured gift, the most treasured thing we could ever imagine. Cling and hold Him tight to your heart. Hold fast to God like a husband clings to his wife and a wife to her husband. There was more that He said. He said, serve Him. We know what serve means. Become His servants. Let Him be your master. Let Him be the Lord who guides, who tells you, who shows you what to do in life. Serve this God. Don't serve yourselves. Serve this God. And then He ends with this phrase, with all your heart and with all your soul. All of it. God says in Isaiah 42:8, I am the Lord, I will give my glory, I'll share it with no one else. God demands 100% allegiance, 100% of our attention, 100% of our worship. That's why you see this all with all your heart, with all your soul, not 95%, and that 5% you're free to worship whatever you want to. He gives us a little bit of leeway. That's not the God we serve. The entirety of our being, all of our existence belongs to God and should be turned over to God in service. That's what we see here. So that's how that's what Joshua tells these people going back across the river, Gad, Reuben, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Serve God this way. And so in verse 6 it says, Joshua blessed them, sent them away, and they went to their tents. But what does that mean? What direction are they headed? East. East. They're leaving the land of Canaan, going east, headed toward the Jordan River so they can cross the river and be united with their loved ones, their wives and their children that they haven't seen in 7 years. Imagine, you watch those videos of these servicemen that are reunited with their wives and their kids after being gone for a year. And I've never had that experience, but that must be just glorious. to hold your husband again, for that man to hold his wife, to cling to that woman as a cherished, cherished soul partner of his after a year of not laying eyes on him. I've never had it. I thank God I've never had it. But that's what these three tribes, the 2.5 tribes, had in store for them, the men and the women and the children, to be united. It was going to be a beautiful event. So Joshua sends them with this charge to worship Yahweh only according to the Mosaic Law. All these things you see on the board, he broke it down. Do all these things every day. Don't ever stray from this. Don't ever let go of that grip you have on your God. Don't ever let go of Him. According to the Mosaic Law, again, I'm going to beat this dead horse. I'm going to keep beating it. According to the Mosaic Law, where was Israel to bring her sacrifices to God? The tabernacle. Look at I just got to give you verses so I can prove this. In Leviticus 17, 1 and 2, Leviticus is a book that's written to the Levites. It's written to the priests. Levi was the third son of Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi. He was the son of Jacob and Leah. And Levi was chosen to be the priests of Israel. That's why you get this name Levite. It's from this son Levi. And why you get this book called Leviticus. It's all about the priesthood. How do we properly worship this God? That's what the book of Leviticus teaches us. How do we worship God? How are the priests to lead, the Levitical priests, the Levites, how are the priests to lead Israel in the proper worship of God? So he gave us a whole book on it. Leviticus. In Leviticus chapter 17, because this is God teaching these things to Israel, just the way God sent Paul to teach us the things of the church. They had different people. Moses was one of them. Yahweh spoke to Moses. And this is what he said, speak to Aaron. What family was Aaron from? Levi. Aaron and Moses are brothers, and they are Levites. So Moses is to speak to Aaron, who was the first high priest of Israel, by the grace of God. Speak to Aaron and to his sons, and to all the sons of Israel, and say to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. So what has He commanded? Look at the next two verses. Any man from the house of Israel who slaughters an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or who slaughters it outside the camp and has not brought it to the doorway of the tent of meeting, that's the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, to present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord. One place this can take place. If you slaughter an animal out of the camp, outside the camp, away from the tabernacle, blood guiltiness is to be reckoned to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. God's serious about sacrificing and bringing sacrifice and coverings for sin through the Levite priesthood at the tabernacle, the tent of meeting of God. Very, very serious about how we are to worship Him. He doesn't leave this up to, wherever you want to do it, that's fine with me. He's very, very orderly. He's perfect in His order. Look what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 5 and 6. You shall seek Yahweh at the place where He, the Lord your God, will choose from all your tribes. Who gets to decide where the tabernacle is? Joshua? Is it the high priest? Who gets to decide where Yahweh will be worshipped? He does. He does. You, at the place you shall seek God, Yahweh, at the place that Yahweh will choose from all your tribes, to establish His name there for His dwelling, and there you shall come. The tabernacle. There you shall bring your burnt offering. So where is Israel? What altar is Israel to burn every burnt offering, every sacrifice? You're to bring your tithes to the priest at the tabernacle, the contribution of your hand, your votive offerings, your free will offerings, and the firstborn of your herd and of your flock. Those first fruits offerings are all to be taken to the place that Yahweh chooses from all the tribes of Israel. Where He chooses to put the tabernacle, that's where the Jewish man was to take his offering. Nowhere else. So, look at what it says in verse 7. Joshua 22, verse 7. Now to the 1/2 tribe of Manasseh, he talks about the land they've given. To the 1/2 tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given a possession in Bashan, across the Jordan River to the east. But to the other half of this tribe of Manasseh, Joshua gave a possession among their brothers westward beyond the Jordan. So the tribe of Manasseh, for whatever reason, decided to split. Half of the tribe is settled on one side of the Jordan, and the other half is settled in the promised land on the west side of the Jordan. That's the way it went down in history. So when Joshua sent them away to their tents, he blessed them, and he said to them, verse 8, return to your tents. What does this remind you of when Israel left another place with riches? Return to your tents with great riches and with very much livestock, with silver and gold and bronze and iron, and with very many clothes. Divide the spoils of your enemies with your brothers. Now, the spoils of your enemies. Where did all this gold and silver and iron and clothing come from? Did Israel cross the Jordan River with it, or did they get it from the Canaanites? They got it from the Canaanites. What does that remind you of? Any other time when Israel left as servants, as slaves of a nation, and God said, you will plunder the Egyptians before you leave, and you will leave Egypt with much gold and with much silver and with many changes of clothes. He provides for Israel. He provides for Israel from the pagan nations. He's done it again. It's just like Israel in Exodus chapter 12, leaving Egypt. There they plundered the Egyptians. Here they plunder the Canaanites, the pagan Canaanites. Verse 9 says, the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, the half tribe of Manasseh returned home. They departed from the sons of Israel at Shiloh. Where did I tell you the tabernacle was? What is one of the last things the tribes of Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh, what is one of the last images, one of the last things that they will have in their mind when they leave Shiloh? The tabernacle, the worship center of their God. They departed from the sons of Israel at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, the promised land, to go to the land of Gilead, to the land of their possession, which they had possessed, according to the command of the Lord through Moses. Again, what was set up at Shiloh? Look what it says in Joshua chapter 18, verse 1. We've already covered this. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel, I'm reading from Joshua 18, verse 1. It's on the screen up here. Then the whole congregation of the sons of Israel assembled themselves at Shiloh. And what did they do there? They set up the tent of meeting there. And the land was subdued before them. The worship center of God was set up at Shiloh. You know how long it stayed there? Remember, for 40 years as Israel wandered in the wilderness, every few days the Lord would pick up that pillar of cloud, and the Lord would move in that pillar of cloud, and Israel was to pack up the tabernacle. The sons of Levi, Kohath, Merari, and Gershom were to pack up all their parts of the tent, the tabernacle, and they were to move that tabernacle forward. It happened 33 or 34 times in 40 years. But they crossed the river Jordan and they set up the tent of meeting at Shiloh. And it stayed there for a long, long, long time. It didn't leave there. You know why the temple left Shiloh? It's a bad story. Or the tabernacle. You know why God finally allowed the tabernacle to be packed up from Shiloh? Because foolish Israel was in battle with their arch nemesis, the Philistines. And Israel decided, if we take the Ark of the Covenant like a rabbit's foot, If we take the Ark of the Covenant with us into battle and like show it off, maybe God will allow us to defeat the Philistines. Well, what happened instead is the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant of God from Israel. And God destroyed that tabernacle. He allowed the tabernacle at Shiloh to be destroyed. It was the foolishness of the Jews. It was a lack of worship in Shiloh. It was a lack of an understanding that the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, was the very dwelling place of God. This isn't some toy, some relic, something that you take into battle. Maybe God will be with you, like rubbing a rabbit's foot or something. This was the Ark of God. This was the Ark of the Covenant of God. And so when Israel decided to take the Ark of the Covenant, not using the Levitical priest to move it, not moving it at the command of God, but moving it because they thought that would please Yahweh and make Him defeat the Philistines, they destroyed the tabernacle at Shiloh. It stood for a couple hundred years there. Long time. Shiloh. So as Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh were leaving Shiloh, the image that they would have had, the only building that rose up at all 2 stories tall was the tent of God, the tabernacle, with its porpoise skins and all its brazen altar and its basin of cleansing and all the rest. That would have been their last image. That's an important thing to know. Keep going in verse 10. When they came to the region of the Jordan. So read verse 10 and tell me what side of the Jordan they are on. Have they crossed or not? Are they in the promised land, or have they crossed the river into the east side of the Jordan, the non-promised land, let's call it? When they came to the region of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, where were they? They were in the land of Canaan. They had not crossed the river yet. The sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a large altar in appearance. So these tribes have not yet crossed the Jordan River yet. They're still in the land of Canaan, the promised land, and they decide to build an altar. Good or bad? If you didn't know any of the rest of the story, is that right or is that wrong? Let me ask you this question. Why do you build an altar? To do what? Why would you build an altar? For what? For what purpose? To sacrifice animals and to worship the living God Yahweh. That's why you build an altar. You're either worshiping God or you're worshiping a false god, but an altar is where you brought your blood sacrifices, and a lot of times where you slayed the blood sacrifice. And now you've got the tribes have built a second altar in Israel. If you didn't know any of the rest of the story, let me ask you again, beating the dead horse, where was Israel to take their sacrifices? To which altar at what place? To the altar at the tabernacle, which was in Shiloh, right? We all agree. And now you've got these 2.5 tribes who've gone rogue, it seems, and they've built a second altar. Remember what Joshua said. Love the Lord, cling to Him, obey His commandments, worship Him at the tabernacle. Is that what it looks like they're doing? No, it looks like they've just gone against God and have done something that's not according to the Mosaic Law. They're not bringing their sacrifice to the altar in Shiloh at the tabernacle. It looks like, if we didn't have the rest of the story, then these people should be killed. Because that's what it looked like they did. Immediately disobeyed God. But we have to let the Bible answer the question. Were they disobeying the Mosaic Law by building this altar? Did they intend to bring animal sacrifices at this altar instead of traveling to Shiloh to the tabernacle? Let's read the story. Verse 11, the sons of Israel heard it. So the 9.5 tribes who had settled in the land of Canaan, Judah and Benjamin and Dan and Naphtali and Asher and all the rest of them, the 9.5 tribes heard about that large altar. And look what it says. They said, behold, the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar at the frontier of the land of Canaan. That's our land. That's God's land. That's Abraham's promised land. and they've built a second altar. So what's their response? They built it in the region of the Jordan on the side belonging to the sons of Israel in the Promised Land. When the sons of Israel heard of it, how did they respond? The whole congregation of the sons of Israel gathered themselves at Shiloh to go out against them in war. Their reaction was, we're going to destroy them. Thank goodness that by the time they got to them, Phinehas, the priest that went with them, and the 10 tribal leaders that went on this journey decided diplomacy might be best. Let's ask a few questions before we just start shooting arrows at our cousins, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. So we read the rest of the story. But they were armed for war, make no mistake. They were ready for civil war. 7 years after walking into the Promised Land, after 500 years had gone by, they're finally in the land, and after 7 short years, they're about to destroy themselves. Then the sons of Israel said to the sons of Reuben, so they have gone. The sons of Israel sent to the sons of Reuben, to the sons of Gad, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, into the land of Gilead. So they built the altar on the west side of the Jordan. They left it there. They crossed the river and went back to their families. They are east of the Jordan now. And so Israel, the 9.5 tribes in the Promised Land, have sent a congregation to them, a diplomatic group. Not warriors. A diplomatic group first to see what's going on. The warriors were prepared at Shiloh. Make no mistake. If this meeting wouldn't have gone well, Israel would have destroyed itself in civil war. Probably weakened the nation enough to where the Canaanites could have rose up and kicked them out of the land of promise. The sons of Israel sent. And who did they send? Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest. Eleazar was Aaron's son. Phinehas is Aaron's grandson. And with him, so Phinehas was the leader of the group, the priest. Why would you send a priest? Why didn't Joshua go? Why would you send a priest? What's the answer? What is at stake here? What's the problem? It's a worship problem. It's an altar problem. It's a worship problem. And you don't send a military leader to try to figure out a worship problem. You send somebody versed in the Word of God, in the law of Moses, to try to figure out if what they're doing is proper or not. So they sent the priest. Exactly right. With him 10 chiefs. 1 chief for each father's household from each of the tribes of Israel. And each one of them was the head of his father's household among the thousands of Israel. They came to the sons of Reuben and to the sons of Gad and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead. So they have crossed the Jordan River. They are not in the Promised Land when this takes place. And they spoke with their cousins. Remember, these are all cousins. They all come from the man Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and these 12 sons are who's represented here. They were once brothers, and now they've broken up to families, and their children are all cousins. This is a family event, a family affair. They came to the sons, and they spoke with them in verse 16, and this is what they said. Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord. What is this unfaithful act which you have committed against the God of Israel? This building of the second altar. You're turning away from following the Lord this day by building yourselves an altar to rebel against the Lord this day. What is their assumption? That the altar is so you can bring sacrifice. And God told us sacrifice was only to be brought to the tabernacle at Shiloh, to the brazen altar, the one made out of bronze that's there. You are rebelling against God, and this is what they say about it. Why is it such a big deal to these 9.5 tribes that their cousins have gone AWOL spiritually? Why do they care? Because when God judges Israel, He judges all of them. Not 2.5 tribes. He judges 12 tribes. When He punishes Israel for one man's disobedience, one man in all of Israel, He punishes all of them. And they know it. And they are desperate for their cousins to come around and not to do this foolish thing against God. Look what it says in verse 17. They give proof of their idea that God punishes all of Israel for this. He says, "Is not the iniquity of Peor enough for us, from which we have not cleansed ourselves to this day, although a plague came on the congregation of the Lord?" You can read about that story. I believe it's Numbers chapter 25. But remember what happened. Balaam. Give me 1 minute. Balaam, remember Balak, hires Balaam. And he wants Balaam to curse Israel. And Balaam stands up on these high plains while the tribes of Israel are in the plains of Moab, 2 million strong, like an ant pile that's been stirred. And he looks down on them, and the Lord would not let Balaam curse Israel. 3 times Balak said, "I hired you to curse them. Let me move you to this other place. Maybe from there you'll be able to curse them." And Balaam could never curse them. We learn from the rest of the Bible that after that event, Balaam put into the minds of these pagans, intermarry with them. Their men won't be able to keep their hands off of your pretty girls. Offer your daughters to them. And your daughters will drive them away from the worship of the one true God, Yahweh. Your daughters will drive them away from that worship. And when they walk away from their God, their own God will destroy them. It was a wonderful plan. I mean, it was wicked and evil and straight from the pits of hell. But it was brilliant also. That was Balaam's idea. And that happened at Peor. When at one of these one of these men of Israel brought one of these pagans into his tent in the camp of Israel. He brought one of these women into his tent. He was having relations with this woman, let's say, and this man, Phinehas, that you read of in verse 13, this very son of Eleazar is the one who took one sword. He didn't need 2. He took one javelin, one spear, and he cast it through the back of the man into the stomach of the woman. They were both dead. He pinned them to the ground and killed them to stop the plague that God had brought on not just the people that had married these pagan women or had gone in and slept with them, but all the sons of Israel. When one group does something against God, the nation Israel bears the brunt. All of them. That's why this is so important. Don't you remember what happened when Balaam gave his advice at Peor? Don't you remember how that happened? And don't you know Phinehas was telling the story? I'm the one who stopped it. Is not the iniquity of Peor enough for us? Is that not a big enough consequence for you to keep from making another altar to walk away from God? Verse 18, is it not a big enough event what happened at Peor that you must turn away this day from following Yahweh? If you rebel against Yahweh today, He will be angry with the whole congregation. Not 2.5 tribes, all 12 of us. We're all going down. The whole congregation of Israel tomorrow. You do something against God today, He'll punish all of us in the morning. All of us. Verse 19, if, however, and this will tell you where the promised land was and where the promised land wasn't. Look what the sons of Israel tell these 2.5 tribes. Listen, if your land, the land of your possession, is unclean, that land on the wrong side of the Jordan River that Moses gave you, then cross into the land of the possession of Yahweh. Cross into the promised land where the Lord's tabernacle stands. See, it's a worship issue. If your land is unclean, that you have to make an altar right on the west side of the Jordan River. Notice they didn't build that altar in the unpromised land. They built that altar in the promised land right across the river where they could get to it. If your land is so unclean that you can't even build your altar there, then abandon your land in Bashan and Gilead and come over and live with us, and we'll divide our land so that you'll have some. That's what they tell them. Why are you on the east side of the river in the first place? Why aren't you in the land of promise? So they say, come take possession of the Lord's land where God's tabernacle stands and take possession among us. If you don't want to live over there, 7 years have gone by, maybe you've changed your minds, come live with us. We're all one family. Only do not rebel against the Lord or rebel against us, because they knew you're taking all of us down with you in this rebellion. Don't rebel against Yahweh or rebel against us, your cousins, by building an altar for yourselves besides the altar of the Lord our God, the one that was at the tabernacle in Shiloh. Don't build a second altar. You're killing all of us. He'll destroy all of us for this. And then he gives another example. Did not Achan, the son of Zerah, act unfaithfully in the things under the ban, and wrath fall on all the congregation of Israel? Remember, there's one man when Israel goes and they battle at Jericho, and God said nothing in Jericho is to be taken. It all belonged to the Lord. There's one man in Israel who sees the silver and the gold and it's too much for him to lay off of. He takes some of it, takes it back into the camp of Israel. How many men? How many men disobeyed God? One guy, Achan. And what happened to Israel? God was ready to send plague on all of them. It says, wrath fell on all the congregation of Israel because they went into the next battle and they were defeated. And they're thinking, I thought God was with us. What's going on? Why isn't God defeating our enemies? Because one man in Israel broke my law and took something that didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. And I told you that. One man. And so they bring it up again. Wrath falls on all the congregation of Israel when one man does something wrong, and that man did not perish alone in his iniquity. So it doesn't matter that only 2.5 tribes have gone rogue according to the other tribes. What matters is that if even one man in Israel walks away from God, we're all going to hear about it. We're all going to be punished for it. This is Israel. Now let's quickly go to the explanation. So that Israel has presented their case. You are walking away from God. You're destroying all of us by this foolish act. And the 2.5 tribes make their case in verse 21. Then the sons of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh answered and spoke to the heads of the families of Israel. And this is what they said. Look at the repetition here. The mighty one, El Elyon. The mighty one, God, Elohim, the Lord, Yahweh. And then they repeat all these names of God they throw out. The mighty one, God, the Lord. The mighty one, God, the Lord. He knows. He knows our hearts. He knows we didn't do anything wrong. He knows, and may Israel itself know, that if it was in rebellion or if in an unfaithful act against the Lord, then don't save us this day. If we have done wrong before the Lord, let us be destroyed. Bring military, bring the battle, bring the men from Shiloh and kill us all. If we've built us an altar to turn away from following the Lord or to offer a burnt offering or a grain offering on it, if that's why we built this altar, to offer sacrifices of peace offerings on it, may the Lord Himself require it. May God Himself give the consequence. Destroy us all. But that's not, cousins, that's not why we did it. You've got it all wrong. Let us explain why we built that altar. And here you have the explanation. But truly we have done this out of concern, for a reason. And this is what they contemplated. This was their concern. This was the thinking of the tribes, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, that lived on the wrong side of the river, not in the promised land. They said, in time to come. So in the years that will follow, in time to come, your sons who live in the promised land, may say to our sons who don't live in the promised land, what have you to do with Yahweh, the God of Israel? You don't live in the promised land. You don't live where God dwells. You don't live among the tabernacle. You're not part of Israel anymore. So the idea that Gad and Reuben and Manasseh built this altar, the reason was for, as ironic as it is, the reason was so that their children would know that the 12 tribes of Israel are united. They're all the nation of Yahweh. That's why they built it. To show their sons in years to come, when your sons in the land of Canaan come and mock our sons, if they were to do that, come and mock our sons, because we know we have no part with Yahweh because we don't live in the promised land. We've built this altar that our sons can say, no, our fathers built this altar, this replica altar, so that we would always remember that the proper altar is in Shiloh and we belong to the God that's worshipped at that altar. It was for unity, but it almost caused civil war. For the Lord has made the Jordan a border. See, they know it's a problem. The Lord has made the Jordan a border between us and you sons of Reuben and sons of Gad. This is what the sons may say. You have no portion in the Lord. You have no inheritance here. You're not a part of us. So your sons may make our sons stop fearing Yahweh. Stop worshiping the one true God. That's why they built it. Therefore, we said to ourselves, let us build an altar, not for burnt offering or for sacrifice. Rather, it shall be a witness between us and you, and between the generations after us, our children, that we are to perform the service of Yahweh before Him at the tabernacle in Shiloh. With our burnt offerings, with our sacrifices, with our peace offerings, so that your sons will not say to our sons in future times, you have no portion in Yahweh. You see why they did it? Because they were going to cross the river, and the river was a border. And in times to come, the people in the promised land may say to the others, you are no longer part of us. You don't live in the promised land. You can't come and worship at our tabernacle. You can't come and bring your offerings to our brazen altar. And so they thought, not God, but these 2.5 tribes thought building this altar as a witness would be a good thing. So it says, therefore we said, it shall come about if they say this to us or to our generations in time to come, then we shall say, no, we do have a part with you. We are part of the nation of Yahweh. They would say, see the copy of the altar of the Lord which our fathers made, not for burnt offering or for sacrifice. Rather, it is simply a witness between us and you. The witness that that they all worship the same God and have equal access to the tabernacle to bring their sacrifices to God. To the tabernacle now and later at the temple. That's what they thought. That's why they built it. Verse 29, far be it from us that we should rebel against Yahweh and turn away from following Yahweh this day by building an altar for burnt offering, for grain, for sacrifice, besides the altar of the Lord our God, which is before His tabernacle. We didn't build a second altar to bring sacrifice to. That's not why we did it. Far be it from us to build an altar besides the holy altar that's beside the tabernacle. The response from the 9.5 tribes, 4 more verses. Verse 30, so when Phinehas the priest, the one that understood the law, when Phinehas and the leaders of the congregation, even the heads of the family, when they heard the words which the sons of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh spoke, it pleased them. No civil war. The explanation was proper. Israel is saved from war. It pleased them. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, he said to the 2.5 tribes, Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, today we know that Yahweh is in our midst, because you have not committed this unfaithful act against the Lord. Now you have delivered the sons of Israel. Instead of destroying the sons of Israel by building an altar to bring sacrifice to, your explanation and your thoughts have delivered Israel. We're not going to be destroyed in the morning by God. You've delivered the sons of Israel from the hand of Yahweh. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the leaders returned from the sons of Reuben and the Gad, from the land of Gilead. This entourage, these Phinehas and his 10 men go back. They brought back word to Israel. The word pleased the sons of Israel. They told him what Gad and Reuben and Manasseh had told him, that the altar was just a witness. The word pleased the sons of Israel. The sons of Israel blessed God. They did not speak of going up against them in war to destroy the land in which the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad were living. So war is off the table now. Thank the Lord. No more civil war. The sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad called the altar witness. That's what they named it. For they said, it is a witness between us that Yahweh is God. Interesting story, huh? Interesting story. In Joshua chapter 23 and Joshua chapter 24, sadly, we bid adieu. We say goodbye to the great leader of the Jewish people, Joshua. In his final discourse to the nation, his farewell address, if you will, comes in the next 2 chapters. And then Joshua ends, and then we get to go into a period of probably about 250 to 280 years known as the Judges. Now, if you've thought that Israel has been disobedient to Yahweh so far, wait till we get to the Judges. What a roller coaster of faithfulness and unfaithfulness Israel goes on for the next couple hundred years as they drift further and further and further away from the worship of God into idolatry. Sad story, but God remains faithful. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father,